it's an accessible role to get into, but the depth of it is quite insane, as I found out over the last year. And I was already doing environment art for quite a while, so this stuff has very deep levels to it. So hopefully when you leave the lecture today, you'll have a bit of a better understanding of some tips and tricks you can apply to your stuff, but also what lighting do in the games industry and the roles that exist if you ever want to transition into it. So we'll be covering, so we'll go over some lighting artist roles. We'll go over a bit about myself as well, important skills and tips, portfolio advice, resources, and then we'll move into some Unreal stuff. And for those of you that want a little mini game, I'll give this one away for free. If you can spot how many tiny cats are hidden throughout the slides, and let me know, you might win some sort of prize. Well, we'll figure it out at the time. So that is a challenge to you. So a little bit about me. I'll try and go through this quick, as I want to get into sort of the meat and potatoes of this sort of stuff. So my name's Elliot. Usually go by EMC 3D Online. That's kind of the brand name, I guess you can call it at this point of what I'm doing online. Currently working as a lighting artist in the games industry, but previously I've worked as a lecturer, course leader, and environment artist across, I think, the last 10, 11 years now, between education and games. So I've done quite a breadth of roles in terms of industry. Currently working remote for the first time, so I am currently downstairs on my personal computer, which is quite old, and which makes me quite sad when I load up Unreal compared to the office PC, which is upstairs, which is like 100 times better. But it's important to keep that separation of professional and what is done personally for EMC 3D or stuff that isn't related to work. So that's again another thing to balance if you are working remote, is making sure you can put yourself in the right mind space and physical space. So upstairs is my office for work, downstairs is the gaming room essentially. Quick history of my education. So I went to Burton College. Had to take a starter course to get onto that because I didn't have very good GCSEs. Did that for 2-3 years and then moved on to Derby Uni, thanks to my mum, who got me to apply because I liked playing games, but I never thought I'd want to make them after college because I wasn't very good at college. Got in through clearing, and that sort of set me on my path to learning the initial skill set back in 2008 to 2011, which was quite a different skill set compared to today. Did a bit in industry and then came out in around about 2015, I think it was, to 2016. Did a master's at Sheffield for games art, games design. So I've kind of gone through the full education spectrum of games. Worked in the industry and taught it as well. So that has given me quite a good perspective on games in general, the learning paths, and trying to get a role in games as well. At college, Burton College, at the end of the 2 years, I won an award for most improved student of the course, which is amazing, right? But to win that award, it means I was super potato for at least 1.5 years of the course. So I was really bad at 3D, didn't want to do it at all. I thought it was literally impossible to become good at 3D because everyone seemed to be able to do it at college except for me. And it was just a case of, putting in time, and over time, I got to that point where I was able to get good enough at it. So, and then at uni, again, same story. Everyone was just miles ahead of me. I'm not naturally a creative person, or at least I wasn't at the time. Starting out, can't draw to save my life. But over time, I was able to kind of find a love for environments and props. I treated university really seriously. Went to all the guest lectures. Put in 7-8 hours a day, sometimes more. And after the 3 years, I was lucky enough to get to a standard where I could get to a junior environment artist role. So industry background. First job was at Lockwood Publishing in Nottingham. Used to be called APSO. They worked on something called PlayStation Home. I'll be very surprised if anyone in the room remembers PlayStation Home, unless you're around the same age as me in my mid-30s, right? It was basically like the second life for PlayStation. So really fun job. You put out an environment every 3 months, very fast sort of space. Naughty Dog sent us their levels from Uncharted 2, or was it Uncharted 3? Uncharted 3, and we had to optimize them, redress them, make them work in a PlayStation 2 engine, which is what we used at PlayStation. Hopped over to Eurocom, which was at the time biggest developer in Derby. They had been going since the 80s. They worked on like the Hercules PS1 game, the GoldenEye remake, which was very good. But then, unfortunately, towards the end of their studio life in 2012, they did layoffs and closed the studio. So I was laid off from that studio after a year. But I got to do some work on 007 Legends, which, you know, not a great game, but I was very proud of it. I have it framed actually upstairs because every game for me is a memory into the development cycle and the friends I've made and what I've learned. So I'm still very proud of this game, despite it not really being too well. Laid off, was kind of in limbo for about a year and a half. Worked on my portfolio / took some time off, and then applied for jobs, tried to get jobs, didn't happen. And then, as happens in the industry, multiple job offers come at you at once, right? So between 2012 and 2014, not too much happening. And then towards 2014, multiple offers, PlayStation, Crytek UK at the time, which was unfortunately about to close as well. It's a very sort of a common story with games. Studios close and then new ones form up. Always told you can't really get a teaching job without being part-time first, which didn't happen to be true. I got very lucky to get employed at Staffs Uni, and as you can see, the duration usually reflects how much you enjoyed it. And this here is really where teaching, I really regained my confidence as an artist, and then I was ready then to jump back into industry to kind of work on games that would you know, leave a legacy, quote unquote, or have more games to be framed on my wall, so that when I look back in 10 years, I can be proud of the work I've done. Around here, I think just the background I had, the teaching experience, and going into lighting, you know, I had a few interview offers and had to decide between studios. Funnily enough, the studio I turned down to go to this one, which I won't name, just had layoffs, so I would have been laid off again, which is, it's dangerous, man. You gotta sort of pick and choose where you want to work and really think about the business side of it as well, which we'll get into. So currently at Ballistic Moon, almost been there a year now, which is crazy to say. Working on Until Dawn, which we announced via the trailer. Can't tell you any more than that, but I can tell you from my experience that these are the types of games that I really wanted to work on. I had no idea they were working on this when I joined. They said they were using Unreal Engine and needed a lighting artist, so I got quite lucky. And yeah, currently working on this to this day. Here's some screenshots from the trailer that we released a few weeks ago. This is public on Steam, so can't really show anything else other than that, or saying anything else. So this is the type of lighting we're pushing. So I have a lot of experience with horror lighting at this point. So let's get into lighting artist roles. So let's start demystifying lighting by going into the actual roles. How is it structured? So I made this chart of a basic sort of structure of what you can expect in most studios, especially big AAA or AA studios as well. So you've got 3 types of lighting artists. So you've got cinematic, who are responsible for lighting cutscenes. You've got level lighting artists, which are lighting environments. And you've got technical lighting artists, which is a bit of a very specialized and rare role. It's a very difficult role to get into because you kind of do lighting, but most of your job is coding tools, Python, defining workflows, finding out why lighting breaks when it's embedded into the code or the engine itself, versus fixing a bug for lighting that is maybe present in a sequencer or the level itself. So very sought after technical lighting artists, and the more on the coding side. Each one of these can sample from another. So you can have level lighting artists that do 50% level, 50% cinematic. Some have more than others technical lighting artist knowledge. Everyone needs to have technical lighting artist knowledge to be a lighter, but there's a level of technical that is super technical, to the point of using the G buffers and studying the frames and using Unreal Insights and stuff like that to understand what lighting is doing behind the scenes. That's how you can dive deep into each of these roles. So for cinematic lighting, you focus on cinematics that are in sequencer. I'll use Unreal terminology here as it's what I'm used to and it's what makes the most sense. So in sequencer, you've got 2 characters, they're doing something, they're talking, they're fighting, whatever it be. You open up that sequencer, you add some lights, you make it look cool. Every time there's a camera cut, you add new lights or copy and paste lights. You basically take something from looking standard, so this would be just environment lighting for this cutscene most likely, so just the ambient values, and you add lighting to get material responses on nice metallic objects, to get the catch light in the eyes. The catch light also tells you where the key light is being placed, which is really good for doing master studies of lights and figuring out why they look the way they do. And in some cases, you can light environments in cinematics. It depends if that is going to be seen in gameplay. So if this area here, and I haven't played this, so I don't know, but if you can access this in gameplay afterwards, and it looks like this, you've got to be careful, because if you suddenly start lighting parts of the environment in the sequencer and you transition into gameplay afterwards, you've got to be very careful what you light environment-wise, because a player will notice that something's changed. Even if it blends, they'll notice that, hey, that doesn't look as bright as that. So usually starting out, I would recommend just light characters. Don't touch environments in your sequences unless you absolutely have to, or unless you, I'd rather, have this in the environment itself. So in gameplay, this all has the relevant highlights, and then you focus purely on the characters. That is a fairly nice non-destructive way to work starting out. But like I said, it's a case-by-case usage. You do sometimes highlight parts of the environment, especially if it's never going to be seen in the game. So it just depends, really. Separate characters from the background. So with the depth of field, which is usually set up by camera artists, you can set some fog. So a fog plane or a spotlight with no shadows, wide angle, turn up the volumetric fog. Separation is a basic composition rule which applies to everything, so it applies to your lighting as well. Separate your character from the background. Fog is a good way to do that. And the lights will respawn when the cutscene starts. So the lights won't be there in the level until the cutscene starts. So that's runtime lights. Once the cutscene ends, the lights disappear. And that's basically how it works for cutscene lighting in a nutshell. Then you've got your level lighters. You want to start your level lighting and complete that before you do your cutscene lighting. Because if you're changing and iterating on the environment lights for your level, and your cinematic lighters are also working on the cinematics, if you're iterating and you're having to change the brightness, the exposure, the EV, every time you do that and snapshot that and check that in, your cinematic lighters have to rework. They will they'll get burnt out. They will be tired of changing things over and over. So it's really good practice to lock in and get the environment approved within most of the main things, the brightness, the overall post-processing. Then you move your level lighters onto another area to get to a passable standard, and you can move your cinematic lighters in, knowing that the work they do is going to match the surrounding environment that is benchmarked. There's always going to be iteration and change, but if you can follow that workflow of getting your environment signed off before your cinematics, you are going to be doing really good for your team in general. And also, if you do both of these, so if you're responsible for lighting an environment and you're also going to do the cutscenes in it, place lights in logical areas. Take the time to design the lighting for your level specifically. And what I mean by that is, let's say we'll take my friend scene here, Visesh, who also works at Ballistic Moon. Let's say that these characters have a lot of cutscenes around here where my mouse is, where these two characters are. If there's a lot of cutscenes that take place there, and as you saw with the cinematic lighting, we always want to add lights. We don't want to just rely on the environment light because it just doesn't look good on the characters. What we could do is we could make some sort of sci-fi lamppost here that is casting onto the environment. So we actually work lights into the design of the level to feed into cinematics, so that when you do your cinematic lighting, you don't have to just light them with fill lights. You can light them with a key light or a rim light that is coming from a practical source. So knowing where your cutscenes take place, where the important cutscenes take place as well, because there are important cutscenes and there's cutscenes where you're just kind of filling the time, right, to build the story. Wherever those big story beats are, you want to make sure that your cinematic lighters have a good excuse to use some cool lights, right? Otherwise, they'll put a key light in and there won't be any light in the environment, and you'll be like, where's that coming from? So figure out the lighting design, where the cutscenes take place, put a lantern there, put a light there. Then when your cinematic lighters go in, they can use that environment light in the sequence, or they can make a fake light that is kind of in the same direction, but not coming from the lantern, because the player will never know, right? You'll never know that it's not coming from the lantern as long as it's in the right direction. And then you can get some really nice lighting. So that's how those two sort of tie in together as well. Exposure, fog, EV, all those things you're responsible for in terms of the level. Technical lighting, you're making tools to make lighting and environment artists, character artists' life easier. So here's some good examples from the Callisto protocol. So there's a color grading tool, making blueprints for lights, making light functions, which are basically black and white textures for the light. So you can really do some funky stuff with that. You can also disable shadows on lights and use a light function to fake a shadow when you're running out of memory, because shadows are, again, the most expensive thing in games. For lighting in general is really expensive, so you can't just throw in all these lights with shadows on. You got to keep it really optimized. So they will make a lot of tools for you to make your life easier. Even tools like you go into Unreal, you're sick of seeing trigger volumes, you're sick of seeing splines. Technical lighting artists can make quality of life tools for Unreal to disable these things, and baking tools and all this sort of stuff. Change the tone mapper. Again, coding knowledge, blueprint knowledge, Python, that's the sort of path you want to start going towards if you want to become a technical lighting artist. They are unicorns in the industry. They're very rare to get. So if you can get one, you want to hold on to them as much as you can. And then the sort of leadership roles. So principal and lead. So what's the differences in a principal and lead? So they're both at the same rank in terms of what you should be getting paid and your experience, but they exist for different reasons. So principal exists because the lead role is a very person and team orientated role. So a lot of your time is actually not spent on the artwork, and this goes for like most lead roles. Your time is spent developing the people, developing the team, being in meetings, and building up a strong team with good team culture and workflows. Now, that isn't for everybody. Your best artist is not necessarily going to make the best lead, because sometimes the best artists aren't the best people persons. People persons? I don't know if that's a word. They're not the best with people, right? And this happens all the time. Leads become leads when really they should become principals, because they're not very good at working with people. This role is so important to have somebody that can be person orientated with a skill set in art. So a lead, for example, will develop team members, recruit, be in meetings, fight fires, protect the team, develop team members in one-to-ones. What do you want to achieve as an artist? What's the type of work you're being assigned? Can we assign you something challenging, but also stuff that is comfortable that you like, so we can level you up? Do you want to do any courses to develop your skill set outside of work? That sort of stuff. They act as a quality filter. So once you've lit a level or lit cutscenes, you work with your lead to fix any issues, and then you filter it to the art director. You always want to have your principal or your lead filter the artwork you're doing as a senior or a mid or a junior, so that you just don't send stuff to the art director that is unchecked. So they'll act as a quality filter, so that when the work reaches the art director, it's been reviewed by the lead for the least minimum sort of having lights that are too bright or too dark, that sort of stuff, basically. So principal is the opposite. Principal focuses on the art. They don't focus on the meetings. They don't focus too much on the sort of mentoring process. They can mentor in times, but usually your principal, you just set them on benchmarking, working on the complex stuff, have them report back to the lead, sometimes support the lead, but their role is very much to avoid the meetings and to set the tone of levels or games. So you would probably send in a principal to a complex environment, tell them to benchmark some cinematics and some environment lighting, make some versions, and then figure out with the art director and the lead which version you want to take forward. Then that benchmark from the principal goes to the rest of the team. So let's say you're working on a Star Wars game and you're assigned an entire planet. Your principal might benchmark the 4 major zones in that planet of what it should look like, and then it gets signed off. And then you divvy out those 4 zones to various senior lighting artists that have a mid or junior with them, or an outsourced team that is working in tandem with your studio. So you focus the principal on the artwork, and they prefer to do production work and not deal with the political nature of a studio, whereas leads do that, and it's important to have leads that are good with working with people in that regard. So that's the difference in terms of those roles. So skills and tips. Let's see what time we're on. Cool. Skills and tips for lighting. So I'll cover some broad skills and tips that I'm going to bring up in my demo I do as well. With lighting, there's so many things to learn. So I'm going to try and cover each area very roughly so that you can have some good takeaways for today and a good base for when you go back to lighting and stuff that you're going to do. So firstly, shared role skills. So no matter what your job specialism is, you need to have a good knowledge of each one. So usually, not always, lighting artists do come from environment art a lot of the time. Not always, but a lot of the time they do. So when you come from environment art, you know what good PBR is, albedo, roughness, same with character art. You know what good textures look like that are physically accurate, which is incredibly important for lighting because lighting reacts to the textures that are made by the environment art and prop team. So that is an example of a breadth of knowledge going into a specialism. We call it like a T-shaped person. So, you know, your sort of height is the specialism that you're doing, and the sort of T, the width, is the broad knowledge of environment art, character art, shaders, technical, all that sort of stuff. So you want to develop your knowledge of each role as much as you can. So when you light characters, what's the way they should be lit? When you light environments, what's the difference between lighting that and characters, and vice versa. So some big ones that everyone should be aware of is lighting is very expensive, shadows are expensive, attenuation radiuses are expensive as well. So make sure you keep in mind when you're lighting that you are paying attention to these. So if you have an environment 20 and it's at night and you have 20 spotlights that cast shadows, hard shadows, firstly, it doesn't really make sense because you wouldn't have hard shadows at night. You would have, if you really want to push it, you'd have very soft shadows. In general, you wouldn't really have too much shadows because you would have the skylight and the distance fields doing the ambient occlusion. So you can fake shadows in places, but that should infer that you shouldn't really have too many shadow casting lights at a nighttime level. So they are very expensive, so be wary of those as well. Attenuation radiuses, so if you have spotlights, the shorter the attenuation, the better. The longer, the more expensive. So if you've got, usually if you start going above like 2000, that is shadow casting, you know, there's concern. As long as it's on its own, if you have loads of spotlights with a high attenuation that are shadow casting, your technical artist is going to suplex you. Make sure your large fade out. Every light has a setting in dynamic lighting, so lumen, to fade out after a distance so it turns off. That should be set. Understand PBR and PBL, so albedo brightness affects ambient lighting, so make sure that your albedos aren't too dark. And figure out how PBL can apply to you. So PBL stands for physical based lighting. It uses EV100 most of the time. This is an exposure sort of system for reflecting real life. So for example, when you do photography and you take pictures, you will expose for an image. So daytime can be anywhere from 12 to 14 EV, which you can set in Unreal. So we'll get into more PBL in a moment, but PBL is a good system to get your stuff in the correct standard. And soft skills, so be easy to work with. This is a big one. Like if you're difficult to work with, no matter how good you are going to alienate people and you won't last long at the studio. Solve problems, try and solve problems on your own as much as you can before including engineers. Don't just include an engineer every time you have the first issue. Try and solve it yourself so that when you go for support, you know you've tried everything on your end. Update Jira. I love Jira. I seem to be in the minority, but Jira is great. It structures you. You know exactly what you need to do. You know the time it takes for a task, and you can then put everything inside a Jira ticket that is relevant to the area you're on. So update your Jira and take responsibility for it, and understand the breadth of skills in each role that you're working on. Use job descriptions as a checklist. This can be done for any role, characters, environment, anything like that. Can you include half the things they have here? Some of them are just there to scare you. So usually when it says you need like experience to be a junior, just apply anyway. But look at some of these, right? So experience with post-processing effects and techniques. Can you post-process correctly? Because if you're post-processing correctly, you're probably not post-processing that much. So if you're ticking on every tick box in the post-process to change the look, and when you turn that post-process off, if your lighting dramatically changes, that's not good, because every time you enable a post-process setting, it incurs a cost in the game. So the minimum amount of post-processing you do, use it as a 20% polish to the 80% lighting that you've done. Don't use post-processing as more than 20% of the process. So some common post-processing tools that you would turn on is exposure, because you need to set the EV. You would tinting, saturation, using the offset in the shadows to bring the shadows up, changing the tone mapper and the tone and slope. But if you're ticking every box on, the global, the shadow, the highlight, these are unnecessary things to be doing in your post-process. So the less, the better. You have a good understanding of gameplay and level design. So are you guiding the player with lights? You know, do they can they follow the golden path to their intended direction? Are you using lights and highlights? Are you making sure the set dressing and working with environment art in a way where the set dressing can point to the right area in the distance? You thrive with learning from others. Again, this is a soft skill one. Be friendly, be inclusive, be easy to work with. And anything else? Tools, yep, using Unreal, Maya, understanding how to light map, because baked lighting is still a very common thing, and there are certain workflows with that, as well as using Lumen as well. So use those to kind of compare against what you want to do. And that applies for everything, character art, environment art. So next one is light organization. This is from an older scene of mine, maybe from like 9 months ago. The names are okay. I would name them differently now, but I'm generally happy with the folder structure. So you want to set up your lighting in a nice organized manner using both naming, folders, and levels. So I would recommend having a level for global lighting, which is your sky, your fog, your post-processing, your directional light, your skylight. And then I would recommend a level for local lighting. The difference in these I'll go over in a moment, but always have a lighting level for the thing you want to do. And do you have lighting that repeats? A lamppost, a lamp? Don't put them and light them in the level, light them in the blueprint, so that every time you put that light fixture, it applies everywhere at once. Now, if you're lighting small scenes for your portfolio, you may not think it's worth it doing a blueprint for a light that repeats once or twice, but try and have the mentality that the small thing I'm lighting is part of a bigger environment. So that one lamppost you put in your scene that you didn't bother to do a blueprint for, that repeats 100 times throughout the game, and they need to be able to change the settings of that all at once. So if you have repeating lights, blueprint them, and you can do a ton of settings in blueprint to control that light. An example of how I set up my levels. So an environment level for environment, you can split this into two as well. You can split structural and props so that your props are separate from your architecture, and then have your global lighting and your level local lighting. So the scene I'm going to demo today, this is the global lighting. This is just the atmosphere, the sky, the fog. And the local lighting is all the highlights, the fake highlights, any fake practical lights that are in the scene. And this is really good to work with because I can work on the local lighting for this scene. Imagine it's a big temple scene. I've got like tons of areas to work on. Someone else could be working on, maybe the principal artist has been asked to change some of the atmospherics. So they can do that up here and check it out with Perforce. I can work on the local lighting here, and we don't interrupt each other. Same with environments. You can have the structure, the walls, the floors, the ceiling on one level, so you can make the structural changes needed. The props can be on another level. So you can have one artist set dressing, one artist fixing something to do with the walls and floors. So always use levels if you can. They help so much. Light mixer is great. So light mixer is one of the only ways you can change multiple lights at once in the outliner. So if you select a spotlight and a point light in the outliner, you don't get the settings for them. But if you use the light mixer, the light mixer will show you every light in your scene or level. You can filter it by level. So this is every light in this environment. You can see that I'm only using the local lighting level. So I've enabled the local lighting level, and all these lights belong to the local lighting level. So here is a good way to see the bigger picture of your scene. I can see the color, which are all aligned. There's no different shades of red. There's no different shades of green, different shades of white. Everything's consistent. I can see the LOD distance. So it will start to LOD after 10,000 units and it will fade in at 1,000 units. I can see that every light is using temperature. I can see that every light is named. I see the light type. And I see the amount of shadows enabled. You notice not every shadow is on because not every light needs a shadow, especially at nighttime. You're faking highlights a lot of the time. So in here, I have shadows on for the lights that matter, but I have shadows off on a lot of the lights because, again, shadows are expensive. And this scene that you're seeing in this light mixer, this is a portfolio scene. So I would not light it the way I've lit it, which I'll mention in the demo, if it was for a game. Lighting for portfolio and lighting for game are very different in terms of your general approach. So I would have even less lights here. Some important things, point lights are crazy expensive with shadows on. So you'll see pretty much all of my point lights don't have shadows on. So it is common to use point lights to fill an area with bounce instead of using a point light with a shadow on. You can use point lights with shadows if it is really needed and it's a small attenuation. So if a character is carrying a lantern, better to have a point light with shadows on. But do bear in mind that a point light with shadows is worth, I believe it's 6 spotlights. 6 or 8, I think it's 6. So 6 spotlights with shadows is worth 1 point light. So point lights they're not forbidden per se, but they're point lights with shadows are left to very, very specific cases with lower attenuation radiuses or gameplay items. So a lot of game environments are lit with spotlights because they are the cheapest. They only render what's in the cone, whereas a spotlight renders everywhere. Area lights are also very expensive. So if you do use area lights and point lights, don't be afraid to turn on shadows if it's justified, but do know that a lot of the time lighting is done with spotlights for games. So PBL, the big one. What is PBL? What's physically based lighting? It's I want to say it's quite a new term. Like not every lighting artist works with this or kind of knows what it is. A lot of games will or will not use it. So I look at PBL as a general guideline system. So if you match your lights roughly into the values that they're meant to be in the real world, your lighting will be more believable, cinematic, and every lighting artist on the project is going to work to similar values. If you don't use PBL, your lights can go all over the place. So I would compare this to working in Blender and working without a scale mesh and making an environment that looks to scale, but you put a character in and the character is the size of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, right? Same thing with PBL. You can make a scene look the same with incorrect values and correct values. The only difference is if your game is using PBL, everyone is in the same system for using correct lighting. So an example of this is the sun is generally benchmarked at 120k lux. If you go to 110, no worries. If you go to 130, no worries. If you go to 150, it's like, do you really need to, for example? Or if you go to 90, that may be more acceptable. So if you stay around those values, you're always going to be good to go. And it gives you somewhere to start. So if you know a sunlight will be 120k lux, you put that in first and then you balance back from that. You can find PBL values from sheets. The Unity sheet's pretty good. It gives you measurements of lights. So for example, the temperature of various lights. So a candle being 1,900 Kelvin. If that was 2,300, wouldn't be a huge deal. But if it was 5,000, you know what I mean? It's a bit far from the intended values. So I use this as a general guideline. I won't be commanded by the values. If I put a candle and it's 2,300, the PBL monster isn't going to come and suplex me, right? You just be sensible with your values. It gives you directional light intensities of lux, local light intensities, so you can change the unit of measurement in Unreal. So with candles, you usually use candela. You could use lumens for everything. It's really up to you. So I use candela on some objects, and I use lumens on others, and lux on bigger lights. EV is incredibly important and quite complex. The good thing about EV is you generally go from about -2 to 14. It's not like when we say EV 100, you go to a scene and say, hey, this is EV 56. There are only a certain amount of EV values. So if you don't understand EV, you will eventually get there. So I might do a daytime scene and I might set it to 14, but if I set it to 12, it looks a bit better for my personal liking. I'll set it to 12. You going above 14, that's when you start to be like EV 30. It's like probably wouldn't happen in my opinion. So EV is a good way to set the general brightness of a scene. The very first thing you do in a post-processing volume, light your scene in the keep it dark, no lights, post-process, set an EV, put in your directional light with your skylight, define the darkest value first, and then go in and light. So I do recommend trying to apply some logical values, aka PBL, to what you're doing. The more I learn about lighting now, after doing it professionally for a year, the less I look for video game tutorials, which I did look for earlier on, and those were great. And I do learn really cool tips and tricks every day on Unreal that make me work 10 times faster. I'm like, oh my God, how did I not know that? The bigger picture is the more I learn about lighting, the less I look to video games and the more I look to cinematography, because the more you light your cutscenes and your game environments as they would light, or loosely based off how they would light and color grade a movie, the more cinematic that you're going to get with your general lighting. So I would actually recommend movies as a really big inspiration for your bigger picture lighting. Why something looks the way it does, because whatever you're working on at the moment, it can be relit 100 times with different looks. You have to pick one. So having that reference and having that story of why you want this to look a certain way is key, right? So this is from Dune. Again, great cinematography. You can see the lights they're using. So maybe we could copy this, right? We could put a spotlight up here, a spotlight here. And this is from Barbarian. Really great color grading, great horror reference as well. So look more to movies and shows with great cinematography, the more you learn, because that is really where a lot of lighting lies. So some portfolio advice. A lot of the same rules apply to any generic portfolio advice you give, so I'll keep this very quick. For lighting, a lot of people, you're gonna use the same marketplace asset as someone else. It's just gonna happen, right? However, there are some marketplace assets that have been lit more than others. So whilst I try to avoid hard and fast rules, if you're lighting the train car, everyone knows which one it is. If you're lighting that for your portfolio, it's been lit over 100 times. And even if you make it look good, it's still been lit 100 times really well. So probably it's like the sci-fi corridor of lighting, right? And there are other scenes that start that. There's that scene with the Western cottage houses, I think it is. That one's popping up quite a lot. So it can be difficult if you are doing relights to find the right scene. I tend to take scenes and maybe redress them or change the mood dramatically, but do my own cameras. But yeah, do try and pick stuff that's a bit more out there, change the story, change the way of it. Don't use the same cameras and you'll be generally pretty good. Metahumans are pretty good for relights. You can customize them quite a lot. There's a few like stylized characters and robot characters out there on the marketplace. There's some new ones that have come from, I think, 3D Character Art SK. They've got like the Nathan Drake knockoff and Tomb Raider knockoff, but they look really good. They cost quite a bomb though. So I've bought relights to support artists. So I think I bought a scene a few months ago. It cost like 50 quid. And it was a great one to relight. So depends where you want to go with your lighting. You can also do your own environment art and light that, or you can pick abstract lighting and do that as well. So some examples of top tier portfolios. So this is Peter Tran's portfolio, most professional work, but you can see that his individual style and the games he works on has a lot of drama to it, a lot of color, a lot of soft lighting. Whereas if we look at Michael Canrose, who is the lead lighting artist at Bluepoint Games, that makes the remake, that made the remake for Demon Souls, which lighting wise is incredible. It's much more a lot of color, but much more hyper realistic in this sort of sense as well. So they're including characters in their beauty shots. They're lighting scenes that are redressed from marketplace assets or making their own. Like this character is available on the marketplace as well. So you do see a repeating things, but you can change marketplace assets enough to the point where it becomes its own unique thing. Technical lighting portfolio, you can see a change in mood and a change in what is focused. So lots of tools from games, skybox tools, substance tools, and this person's done movie lighting as well. And then for abstract lighting, this is the direction I'm starting to go with inspiration. So this is from Harley Wilson, lighting artist at Ubisoft, and this is unique. You see a little bit of this sort of lighting, the neon Greek god statue lighting, but not much. But this sort of stuff, these abstract neon Tron-like lighting scenes that he's remade from a reference. You don't see a lot of this. So this is the route I'm starting to go with the work I'm doing, as I am getting my fulfillment of realistic work at work, because I do it 8 hours a day, right? So I need to offset that with simpler scenes with abstract lighting. And some resources. So I've made a master list of basically top tier video game lighting resources, courses, YouTube videos. I've looked through each one, except for the paid courses, but I know off reputation they're pretty good. I've linked the author portfolio so you can see the quality of the person that made the resource for what you want to do. It has filters, it has tabs. Here it is. So there's already 2 people on it. So you can look at this list, get the list. You can get YouTube, blogs, mentorships, courses. I recently added a cinematography section. As I said, it's very important, cinematography. So this list progresses as my skill set progresses as well. And we've had some contributions as well from some folks. So feel free to kind of link this out. I can send this link over to Mike if need be as well. So yeah, so we've got about 20 minutes, I think, so I'll speed up. Good resources. I tend to avoid going too crazy on add-ons just because they never work in a studio environment. They're very expensive. However, Easy Fog and Ultra Dynamic Sky, they're really good for personal work. I don't think they're too great for production work in my opinion, but still use them, but be wary. So if you know how to set your own sky up with HDRI, do that first and then use UDS, because a lot of the UDS stuff can take the settings away from you that you'll understand. So fog cards are great, just use them to separate and add depth, but do be wary. Lots of fog cards is expensive, sky systems are expensive, so just be wary when you're using them that they are quite expensive. So I want to move into demo time, and then we'll do questions after that. No worries. So I believe now my PC is very, very slow. So forgive me if the UI looks squished and stuff. It does make me sad every time I use this PC versus the one upstairs, because it has a lot more errors. So the first thing I want to show you is environment, and then I want to show you some character stuff. So this is a scene I finished in like January. So I've progressed much further past this, but this was a scene I did after I was in my lighting job for a while. So this is a portfolio scene. So it's got 2 camera shots with different aspect ratios, and it's portfolio based. What do I mean by that? Well, I treat portfolio pieces 9 times out of 10 as paintings. So there are a lot of lights in here that are doing minimal highlighting of certain things. Whereas in games, I tend to avoid adding fake highlights and would prefer to do the overall brightness with exposure. So do bear that in mind, that for your portfolio, you're going to paint light a lot more than if I was lighting this for a game, it'd be much different. So if I turn the camera around, it's like the Homer Simpson meme where he's got a 6-pack at the front and he's pinned all of his chub to his back, right? So you never turn the camera around. So the fog is also set, everything's set off at a certain distance. So this would not work in a video game scenario, but it's a portfolio piece to prove a general point of visual quality. So if I did relight this, it would be completely from scratch, and these little holes disappear with nanite, but my PC is a 2 potato for nanite. So let's go over some of the things I mentioned in the slides. So I mentioned levels. You can see here that I have 2 lighting levels, global and local, just like I put in the slides, right? If I turn these off, my scene goes to complete darkness. I can also change my outliner in the top to be only current level, which will show me whatever I double click on and activate. So if I activate my global lighting by double clicking it, I have my fog, my local height fog, my post-process, my sky atmosphere, my skylight, and I have sneakily put my render cameras in here because I'm lazy, but you know, I would put my cameras in a camera level. And let's pretend this was a game level. This would be the lighting at night without any highlights, local lighting. It would be the lighting that carries 70% of the environment before we add fake highlights. Likewise, if I do this global lighting level, if this temple scene is 1 out of 10 levels for a whole zone I'm doing, that are different levels, differently streamed, so you have a loading screen between them or you stream them in, I can have this global lighting level in every persistent level. So this would be 1 of 10 persistent levels. I could put this global lighting in 10 of those. And any settings I change, just like I said with blueprints, any settings I change here would change all those levels at once. So if you're responsible for an entire zone, planet, country, section that is meant to have a certain look, you first set the global lighting so that everywhere has the same look and feel, because everything in the world should be governed by the same global lighting. If you go outside now, everything is governed by the global lighting of the world. And then you can go in and add your practical lights, your fake lights, whatever you want to do, but it's still governed by the global lighting. So in the local lighting, I double click this, it activates my global lighting level. This is where the fake lights go. So this is where the fake spotlights go, the practical lights go. This scene is 100% fake lighting. I will not do this much fake lighting because if I walk here, you're not meant to go here, but you see a floating light, right? You don't see any practical sources to them. But I've designed it to work from 2 camera angles, which is important because if you look into 2 camera angles, you will de-scope yourself 100%. Scope is one of the biggest tricks of environment art, characters, and lighting. You try and do these big environments when in reality you should lock a camera into 2 or 3 shots and only address that shot. So that's where my light's contained. If I go into my light mixer, I usually have 2 viewports on 2 monitors. So imagine me having 2 viewports, but this will be on the second monitor. I'm going to full screen it. But at the moment, you can see in my light mixer, I see every light in the level I've double clicked on. So I see my local lights and my rim lights. I see all the colors at once. I see all the colors here. So sometimes you might, depending on what you've been lighting or if you've relit someone's work, you might have something like this, right? And you'll never know that you'll have something like this unless you look at the light mixer. So you'll have like, sometimes it's justified, but I tend to avoid doing this. But you'll load up the light mixer and you'll see there's different colors. It's not consistent. So when you color grade, if you color grade, that consistency is going to start to go out the window. So the first thing I do is if I'm looking at a level and I'm like, all the highlights are meant to be the same color, I select all my lights, I hit the color, let me get the original color, and then boom, I'm done. Now they're all consistent. Same with the values. If I'm using temperature here and it's going to be white, I will adjust the value. And now I have consistency in my light colors. If you want to add a setting that you go to all the time, you can right click on any bar up here and you can add something. So let's say a setting that you always look at is if shadows are enabled, right? I'll right click and I'll look for cast shadows. Oops. And now cast shadows has been added to the light mixer. So I can go into a level and maybe it's out of memory. Maybe my my shadow milliseconds are out because we always have a limit in games, right? If all these shadows are on like this, I'm going to start asking questions of what's going on here, because if it's a nighttime level, even if it's a daytime level, what are all these shadow casters doing? So you want to actively turn off your shadows if it isn't doing anything and if it makes sense for what you're doing. I can see the channels it's using. So this light here is using channel 2 for a specific reason. That might be because it's either I've not said it or it might be intended for a character. Another one you want to put in here is your fade distance. So there are two settings, fade distance and when the lights turn off. They're in here somewhere, but you can find them on each light, and basically it will tell the light to turn off after a certain distance, which is very important for games, right? So I have about 30 options up here that I look at on my second monitor when I'm doing big picture lighting. I'm approaching an entire zone. I like to name my lights. I like to structure them. I like them to be consistent. I will use this to sanity check that, all right? So you can toggle this only in current level if you want every light or just a few of the lights. If we look at certain lights, a lot of it is, again, just fake lights for portfolio work. But if I was doing this for production, I would hide a lot of these, because sometimes what can happen, depending on how you're set up, if you do a fake light and a character walks through it, they're going to get hit by this light randomly. You only have 3 lighting channels in Unreal. You'd be very surprised how quickly those lighting channels are reserved for other departments. So you want to be careful with what you're doing with lighting. A common one is to put characters on lighting channel 1 and 0. Put cinematic lights on 1 and put environment lights on 0, depending on if you want the character to go through a light that is active in what they're doing. Be wary of attenuation radius. So this one's on 1300. It is, giving a very minor highlight. If I was lighting this for production, I wouldn't even have it. But if I was lighting it and I wanted a highlight, I'd maybe bring down the attenuation, because anything in this cone is rendered. So the further the cone goes, the better or worse it will be. The way I light as well is I will lock my camera to the second monitor. I'll open up a new viewport, and this might lag my potato PC. So I'll have this on the second monitor. I will lock the first, and I will take off cinematic control on the second. I will enable my cinematic viewport, go back to the camera, and I'll turn on this middle crosshair. You can turn on the 3x3, which is rule of thirds, but I turn on this one. I think it's the crosshair or grid. And I do this purposely for when I pilot lights. So I probably need to do it here as well, in this one as well, to be honest. Because the way I light cutscenes, and I use pilot a lot. Some people don't use pilot, they just move the lights in space and align them. Depends where you come from. I have to pilot lights, otherwise lighting feels really weird to me. So I'll turn the crosshair on. I'll find a light. Let's say I like this light, right? I'll do Control-Shift-P. Now, you can see my rotation is really weird. It's probably really weird because at some point I piloted it, then I rotated it without meaning to. So I'll reset the rotation. And then you kind of have to imagine that this is on a second monitor, and I'll pilot the light in the one viewport with the crosshair. The crosshair represents the middle of my spotlight. And the render on my other monitor is my master view. And I will start to literally light and paint with the light and use WASD to place that light. Also, if you're using WASD, as you use W, you can use the mouse wheel to slow down the speed or speed it up. Because if you use that menu in the top right to change it, it's pretty scuffed. So as I'm moving around, I will scroll down to go really slow. I will scroll up to go fast using WASD. Really good hotkey that will save you a lot of time. So I could place this light to hit a highlight. I also have a hotkey on my PC. You can do this in Windows to change your screen to black and white. So you can go to your monitor settings, enable color filters. I do have a video, a small 1-minute video of it on my channel as well. Going into black and white can help you look at the values, making sure nothing goes to complete black. And then I can use the hotkey again to go back to color when I'm lighting with my crosshair. So that is how I generally approach portfolio lighting. I want to move on to the character stuff as well. Just wondering if, actually, I'll move on to the character stuff because we are strapped for time, and then I'll try and finish that up in 5 minutes to give you guys 10 minutes for Q&A. When you approach character lighting for cutscenes, it's a lot quicker than environments because there are hundreds of cutscenes in the game. You have to get through them pretty quick. So you don't get too much time to stop and smell the roses per se. Whereas the environment, you've got to define the look first, right? So I'll use the MetaHuman example. I don't have any lights except for a point light in the main level. So this would be my quote unquote environment lighting, right? The character might receive a tiny bit of character lighting. It depends. Like if you're using a baked lighting workflow, there are tricks where you can tell the environment lighting, the volumetric light maps, not to touch the character, because sometimes you can get light pollution from the environment and it will wash your character out or give you an unintended look. So sometimes you want the characters to be very dark before you start lighting them. So sequencer is probably the main thing you want to do for lighting. So again, I've set up a camera, usually in sequencer. So the one way, there are a few ways to light cutscenes, and this is not the way I use anymore, but this is a way you can see on GDC talks for various sort of games. So it is in the public. So this is one way you can light. So every camera cut. So if I start up the cutscene and I double click this camera to go into my view, I already did a bit of lighting on this for the sake of speed. We have a cutscene and we have one camera swap for now. So well, I don't want you to, there we go. So up to here, we camera swap. So one workflow you can do is the keyframe workflow. So you can see I've already set this up. So we have a 2 light setup. We could do 3 lights if we wanted. 2 lights does the job here. In shot 2, we have a 2 light setup, but they're 2 separate lights, and you'll notice they've been keyframed to stop and start every time the camera ends, because when your camera is moving around in a cinematic or cutting to various shots, the lighting that you made look pretty good on the first shot, it might need adjusting a tiny bit to make look good on the second shot. Now, don't change it in a dramatic way where, oh, the key light is on the left, now it's on the right in the camera, you know, what's going on. But you can sneakily move lights to get a good catch light in the eye between shots. So if I go in, and I understand this looks quite cramped because I can't really show 2 monitors, but if I go in and I disable my cinematic view and I pilot the key light on shot A, I'm pointing in a sort of typical Rembrandt sort of light. I also set my viewport to 90 because if it's too close up, you can't see anything. So I'm a typical Rembrandt style. If you point the light in the way where the nose is kind of blocking the side of the character's face in this angle, this is why I always pilot lights. Also with the crosshair trick, which I forgot to turn on. So if I turn on the crosshair trick, you'll see I use the crosshair. You can even use the grid if you want. I use this as like a center point of the light to aim at the character. It's really good. So if that's my light for shot A, let's go to shot B and look at where this light is. So it's kind of in a similar spot, but not like 100% in the same spot. So as you go between your lights, you can change the positions a tiny bit to suit the lighting a bit better. So to do this, all you really need to do is whatever cutscene you've got, all you do is you go in and you hover over where the frame is about to change. So if I delete these marks, so I know that, for example, there's a camera change. And usually a camera artist set this up. Camera artist is a separate role that work very close with lighters. They set up your cinematics for you before you go in and light. So if I go in, right, I know there's a camera change here. So I'll click once anywhere, hit left and right on the arrow, because sometimes it can be off. There's the change. If I hit M on the keyboard, I generate a blue marker called A. That signifies when the camera changes. So all I would do then is I would add a folder. I'd call it A. I would make a light of some sort. Make a light in the main level and then drag it into here. So if I wanted to do that, if you could stop playing, please. There we go. And again, I have 2 viewports that lock the camera in, so I'm doing a bit of 2 and 4 in this example. But let's say I was going to use the point light, which I wouldn't. The point light's in the main level. I drag it over into the cinematic. Very important that once you drag it over, you change it to spawnable. When you change it to spawnable, it means this point light will only appear when this cutscene plays. I then move this point light in a way that is gonna, I don't know, hit my character in a cool way. Let's say this is really cool. Drag it into the folder, F2, Ada key. Change my settings, make sure that when the camera changes to A, that this doesn't go past A, so you can actually keyframe where it's going to spawn on and off, for example. And that's one workflow. When you change that, it goes red. That means when it goes to B, the light enables, disables. There's other workflows that make this a bit easier, but this is a workflow that is used in quite a lot of places. So what you eventually have is, if you can imagine, have like a Gantt chart of lighting that. So you have sometimes shots go from A to Z, right? And then they can change. What's good about lighting real-time scenes is if you have a scene that has a light in and it's being really annoying, you can override lights in the environment in the sequencer. So we put that light in, we changed it to spawnable, that spawns it in the level. This light that's hitting the background, let's say I don't like it in the sequence. I drag it in. I don't turn it to spawnable. What this does now is it will take that environment light, and whenever the sequence plays, it will overwrite the environment light just for that sequence, and it will turn it off. So if you're lighting a cutscene, you've got this really annoying environment light that is meant to be in the environment, but it's making a distracting light on your character, you drag it into your cutscene, you overwrite the settings here, and what I like to do is I like to make a folder, I call it overridden environment lights. This only really works, in my experience, with dynamic lighting. If you're using baked lighting, you won't get the light. If it's a stationary light, you can do it. So usually in baked lighting, you put stationary lights on light fixtures because you want to turn the light off in the cutscene. Other than that, I use the pilot light technique. I have 2 screens up with my sequencer on. I'll go through, I'll pilot the lights. I'll spend about 5-10 minutes a shot. Like I said, sometimes I have to go through 100 shots a week, right? And the environment's been defined. So that's as quick as an overview of the way I light, the way I organize, and the tools I use. So hopefully you can take some cool stuff from that in what you're doing. And yeah, I think that's really about it. So I know you probably only got 2 minutes left there. I don't know if someone's going to kick you out, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to take any as much as I can.
In industry, how long are you given to light an environment, and how does that compare to how long you spend on a personal portfolio environment?
Hey, that's a really good question. So for a personal project, so when I was lighting my initial portfolio, this scene took about 4 days. And when I say 4 days, I mean a few hours here and there with feedback. This one took 2 days. By the way, I have the before and afters on there. This one took about 3 days. This one was a lot more work because in the before and after, it's very different. It was actually an environment art project. This one took, I worked on this one for about 2 months, but when I say I worked on it for 2 months, I spent like an hour every few days on it. So realistically, if you're lighting an area, a medium-sized area that takes up maybe like 10 minutes of gameplay, you can give them like 4 or 5 days for the first pass. So it does work out about the same. With personal work, I have no limitations, so I don't have to bug fix. I don't have to do any of that stuff, so it can be a lot quicker. For characters, I used to put like on here, I don't know why, I put the times for more as like a self-learning thing, but this took me 7 hours. If I was lighting this in industry, this would take me 10 minutes. So character lighting is usually about 10 minutes a shot in my experience, depending on the complexity. Like if I'm doing a portfolio still of this, if I'm going for a certain mood, an hour. If I've already defined a look, 10 minutes, because I have to move through hundreds of shots every week, right? Any cinematic lighter does. So that's the general time state change of those two.
Okay, then, thank you. And For your skies, do you use the standard Unreal skies or do you always use HDRIs?
Funnily enough, I don't think I have any skies in my work, but I would recommend using HDRI. Go to hdrihaven.com, get a sky, put it as a HDRI or on a sky dome, and do that before you move on to ultra dynamic sky, because you'll be surprised how good a sky texture can look on its own with fog compared to a whole sky system.
Okay then, just one more. Do all the same rules and techniques that apply to a hyper-realistic environment also apply to a heavy stylized hand-painted environment?
Some do. So with stylized stuff, and this does err on slightly stylized because there are very vibrant colors, versus like maybe lighting for like Hunt Showdown. But with stylized, you get to go a bit crazy with the colors, so you don't get many opportunities to use strong greens and purples, and whereas if you light a Disney game, you get to really go into the crazy color theory of it. So you get to same fundamentals of optimization, but you get to use a lot more vibrant colors in your color selection.
Cool. I don't think we're being kicked out just yet. So.
Oh, good. That's awesome.
I wanted to ask actually, how much of the because my background is being around Leamington, and was surrounded by sort of smaller indie studios, and a lot of baked lighting is expected in a portfolio. Is there a move away from that, do you think, coming in the future with the advent of Lumen, and where are we going?
Yeah, so currently there's probably 3 lighting styles. There's baked lighting with stationary lights, so static and stationary. There's dynamic lighting that isn't Lumen, so just using movable lights and using point lights to fake bounce. And then there's Lumen. I hate baked lighting. It's just a pain in the ass, but it is the most optimized and sort of still relevant lighting method used by a lot of studios. Studios are starting to shift to dynamic and Lumen, but if you enter the industry as a lighting artist, there is a 90% chance you will encounter a level that needs to be baked, because not every game has a mixture of baked and dynamic depending on the rationale, and it depends on the level as well. Sometimes you need really good bounce lighting. Lumen is also very expensive. It's not quite worked out for certain genres of games, so baked lighting, knowing how to do your light maps, using static and stationary lights in the right way, and using light mass, that is a big system that needs to be taught and needs to be learned from students, so that when they do the Lumen stuff, they can flex between each technique.
Okay. How many lighting artists are there on, sort of medium-sized game studios?
Medium size, you'll probably have like 4 to 5 internal artists, and then you could have anywhere from 10 to 20 external artists, depending on the studio. So a lot of studios outsource a selection of lighting to certain companies, and you can see these companies online where they've outsourced to, and they'll work with the internal artists to define looks. So it can build quite up, but in terms of the in-house spot, lighting artists usually range from 3 to 5 in a lot of cases for medium.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much. I'm sure you'll be able to hear them give you a round of applause right now.
Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. Awesome.
Cheers, man. I'll let you get back to your work.
Yeah, thanks again, guys, and cheers again, Mike, for organising this. It's awesome.
No worries, man. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Take care, guys. Bye.